Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Rogue Deck Chronicles. We are back. We had a tournament this weekend, and I can't wait to talk about some of the decks that made day two and also talk about the results. But of course, I am not alone. I have Dev with me. Dev, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Had a good weekend. Was able to just relax. Had a 5 day work weekend, which is amazing. Didn't have to work for 5 days. Is always a great feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And also was able to kind of play around some of the Phantasmal Flame archetypes on the ladder. So it was always really good. So it's interesting because the stuff I was testing clearly didn't make it to day two of the tournament. So
Yeah.
it's that kind of dichotomy of kind of just playing around and experimenting and then seeing what's doing well at tournaments. Is always interesting kind of dynamic.
Oh yeah. Sometimes you just want to play some fun decks, enjoy the game. A lot of times we get caught up and like we have to play the competitive decks. Like, yeah, winning's fun, but sometimes you want to play those like off the wall, like weird decks just to see how they work. And if you can get a win from it, it just makes it that much better.
Mhm.
So, speaking of playing a lot of games, we had a regional in Europe this weekend. So,
Mhm.
I know maybe not a lot of Americans went over there because of the Thanksgiving holiday, but Stuttgart had the regional, and it won with Charizard Noctowl. So Devin,
Yes,
huh?
it's a yes, but right.
Yes, but yeah. Um, I will say there is an interesting inclusion in this list. So Dev, why don't you talk about like what was different about this Charizard list?
Yeah. So the biggest difference on this list versus lists prior to Phantasmal Flames is not the fact that this list has a Mega Charizard XEX in it. It actually does not. It's the fact that this list carries four Dawns in it. And Dawn is a new supporter coming from Phantasmal Flames that says search your deck for a basic, a stage 1, and a stage 2. Reveal them, put in your hand, then shuffle your deck. It makes perfect sense in these multiple stage 2 line decks that need to have different pieces at different tempos. And then on
Mm-hmm.
top of this list, it runs two Terapagos EXs for an alternate attacker. And then it runs. I think the Klefki's been a relatively new add to this archetype, where
It
really
is,
if it's in
yeah.
the active, it shuts down abilities, which is interesting because this deck is all about abilities, but it's all about abilities at certain times. So
Mhm.
it's very much it's a Charizard EX deck. Has no Mega in it, but it has kind of reformed itself with the Phantasmal Flames meta by adding probably one of the best supporters from Phantasmal Flames into the deck and making that the backbone of the engine.
I find it interesting too because you play the Pidgeot, but you also play the Noctowl. So you have a lot of different ways to cherry pick cards that you need. Um, I actually really like the Klefki ad. That is new. We've seen it in like Gardevoir before. Maybe I want to say in Dragapult in early days, I think. But we've never really seen it in Charizard. But it makes perfect sense, especially in the beginning, because it really negates a lot of the abilities that some of these big basic Pokemon have. So it negates the run Aaron ability for a Kangaskhan. Um, it negates one of the new Charmanders too with the free retreat. So if you're going against a mirror match, you have the Klefki in the active. They can't retreat because the ability is off.
Yeah,
So it's little things like that that I think it's a really cool ad. And it's only a single prizer, so like, okay, the Klefki gets knocked out. They're not knocking out your Charizard, and then you're setting up your board. It's a really like something you're willing to sacrifice in the early game just so you can advance your board state.
well, it's more than just an early game sacrifice. You can play this card anytime during the game because you are not running any three prizers. You're running two prizers almost exclusively. You can put the Klefki in the active to slow your opponent down for a turn for you to restabilize, and you don't have to pop your Dusclops or Dusknoir if you don't want to in that turn. So making your opponent play the 7 to 8 prize game by just making them go through those single prizers in a deck that doesn't run 3 prizers is very, very smart. And it can also trigger and tempo your opponent's situation to where your Briar becomes more active more often. So it's a really good math fixer in terms of prize math, and it really does slow the game down to where it will be the pace you want it to be at the timing you want it to be at. Your opponent can't control anything with Klefki.
I also like the Area Zero underdefs in this list too, because it forces your opponent to make a decision. So if you hit, you don't knock it out, and you have that stadium in play, you can find a way to get that stadium out and then get rid of that Pokemon that is heavily damaged. So it's like, I like that option with it, especially with Charizard, because it is very tanky. So it's really hard to knock that out. And there's not a lot of grass decks out there right now. So you're not really getting one shot unless you're going against like Goldango or something like that. So I like that aspect of it. And just also having the ability to have a lot of options on your board, so you can use multiple Noctowls, you can quick search with the Pidgeot, you can have multiple Dusknars set up to threaten some KOs. It just makes your board very versatile, and really, if your opponent's scary looking, like you don't know what is your threat. Like, yeah, you have the Charizard EX, but like, what about everything else that can really attack you as well?
Yeah, Charizard can set up Terrapagos, Charizard can set up Pidgeot, Charizard can set itself up. It's to the point where you have multiple attackers, and they're not just situational attackers, they're just all-around good, solid attackers. A very poor assessment of this deck is you kind of put the great parts of Terrapagos and the great parts of Charizard and mash them together. But when you really analyze the 60, it's more than that. You're putting cards that actually do have synergy together, more lined up, more fine-tuned mashup, but it has all the greatest hits of Terrapagos EX with the greatest hits of Charizard, and really just emphasizes and kind of takes advantage of the current meta for sure.
Oh yeah, this is a great build. Charizard is making a comeback even without the Mega evolution. I know a lot of top players are playing this now. I'm not sure it's because Gardevoir has become more and more popular, but yeah, everyone thought Charizard was on its way out, and obviously it's not. It's here to stay. And if you're planning to go in any tournaments, whether it be a regional or even a local level, I would say expect to hit 1 or 2 Charizards.
Oh yeah, Charizard was never going to go away. In fact, a lot of people were like, "Oh, Charizard's going to get better when the Mega EX comes out," and it can absolutely, because Charizard EX, the Terra Charizard EX, accelerates energy to power up the Mega X. But without it, you don't need it. It's just like with Gardevoir. Everyone goes, "Oh, Mega Gardevoir is going to make Gardevoir better." Well, yes and no. Charizard is just getting the rebirthing that everyone thought it would get, but also just in a different way. So it was never going to die. Rotation's the only thing that's going to take Charizard away, just like rotation's the only thing that's going to take Gardevoir away. So it just got rebranded, it got reskinned, and kind of it. I think this version is going to be the best version of Charizard, unless you are risky enough to run in a Mega XEX. But I don't think a 3 prizer is necessary with Charizard and any of its iterations right now.
Well, you say that, and then we get this new Charizard variant from none other than Tor Reckliffe. He plays one of the Mega EX, but he also pairs it with the Mega Lopunny. So again, it's like Charizard didn't need help, but the creativity we see with these top players of like, yeah, I see you, but let's try see how Lopunny fits in this. And oh yeah, let's play one of the Mega. And a lot of the top players in Europe made day 2 with it. Obviously, it didn't go like super high up compared to the regular Charizard lists. But like a player like Tor, where he already has his Worlds invite, and he's just experimenting with the new cards at this point and doing well with it too.
Yeah, I would say the 2 cards that made the biggest impact from Phantasmal Flames is Dawn and Mega Lopunny EX. And that is I think those 2 are easily the 2 most impactful cards of the set. We can easily see from the results. And then I think a very distant third is the Mega Sharpedo archetype. Toxtricity, Mega Sharpedo, because it did make some appearances in day 2. But beyond that, there's such a large gap in quality of cards in this moment of Phantasmal Flames. It's going to be really hard to say, and I think we've talked about it on Set Review and a couple other pieces, where this set was just generally underwhelming, where it has some really good cards, Dawn, Megalopony, but the set just doesn't carry enough weight by itself to really impact the meta by bringing in an archetype from scratch. This is just not a set like that. And as much as people want Charizard to be that, it isn't.
No, the closest we have to that is that Mega Sharpedo. Even then, like, let's look at it. I think only, what, 2 made day 2 with it?
Yeah, I think there's only 2 or 3 Mega Sharpedos made day 2. And Mega Sharpedo generally runs one of 2 ways, depending on how you want to build it. You either run it with Monkey Dory as kind of your energy passer, which is what most people run it as, or you run it with the poison package to really try to accelerate your damage onto your Sharpedo. And then you just do Binding Mochi and just, again, poison shenanigans to kind of get your Sharpedo turned on turn 2 as quickly and as efficiently as possible. But it's too dependent on too many pieces. It's very much a combo deck. Now, the combo is very easy to pull off of a whole bunch of stage 1s, but it just isn't... It isn't strong enough on a power level to really make an impact long-term for the format.
Yeah, and I'm looking it up. 3 made day 2. Granted, 2 of them made top 256, which is a very big accomplishment in itself, with the highest being 173rd. And yeah, but even then, like, it's still in the middle of the pack of day 2. And I'm looking at the list that made it.
So the highest rated list is very much a straightforward Sharpedo Monkey Dory list that uses Toxtricity to get damage onto your board. And it runs a Seviper and a Purloin, which are your single prize tech. And all the Purloin does is search your deck for 3 Darkness Pokemon, reveal them, put in your hand as an attack. So the Purloin's really your lead if you can get that to get cards into your hand. And then the other 2 decks, other 2 players that made day 2, they focus more on the poison package a little bit. So they have the Brubonnets, they have the Petron, they have the Petron EX, that kind of stuff. So again, generally Sharpedo's kind of been figured out, and it's just not quite good enough. Even with it having the darkness typing, it's not quite good enough.
Yeah, but with that being said, let's look at the top 8. Let's go back to the top results, and there is a deck that is missing there that we're used to seeing a lot, and it's Gardevoir. The top placement was 10th, and this tournament had a top 9 cut, so it just barely missed out. But again, no Gardevoir. We've seen that in specifically in a couple of the European tournaments. So do you think the Charizard and more of the dark support type Pokemon and cards played a factor in seeing Gardevoir not saying not doing well, because it's still very popular in day 2, but it didn't make top cut like we're used to seeing?
No, absolutely. So Gardevoir was the 2nd most played deck in day 2, earned the 3rd most points in day 2. But I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's Charizard did... People brought Charizard with the darkness type Charizard in mind to counter Gardevoir. People are playing Marnie's Grimmsnarl more often. People are playing Mega Absol Box more often. So if you would look at the amount of dark archetypes that are flooding the field right now, Gardevoir has a lot of landmines it has to avoid. Is it strong enough to survive it? Absolutely it can. Even a subpar player can probably navigate a field with 3 to 4 archetypes that are darkness type attackers. And as a Gardevoir player, you can still outplay them very easily. Gardevoir is that good of an archetype. But I think Gardevoir has been figured out. I think countering Gardevoir has been figured out. So when it comes to the top tables, we're talking top 32 at a regional. once we're getting to around 12, 13, and 14, Gardevoir's having a harder and harder time really going to the cream of the top there because it has to navigate so much for so long. Well, if you look at Charizard, Charizard doesn't care if you're a psychic type, if you're a grass type, if you're a metal type. It just will hit you really hard. Type matchup means nothing when you're doing basic one-shots for the end of the game. That's why Charizard's been so good for so long. Same with Golden Go. Golden Go doesn't care. It can one-shot you at any turn of any game. So I think that is getting to its advantage. Now, Gardevoir can one-shot anytime, any game, because it does have all those single-prize attackers that can really do that for itself. But I think it's just harder for a Gardevoir player to navigate 14 rounds of dark archetypes when it's just not one archetype. You're navigating 3 different archetypes for weakness where they don't have to try as hard. So I think that might be a reason why this tournament Gardevoir isn't being as well. But it's not saying Gardevoir didn't show up. Like we said, second most popular deck, third most points in the weekend. It's still there.
Yeah, it reminds me of when Ceruledge was very popular. Like when the Solok Lunatone engine first came out with the last set, like that was one of the most popular archetypes in the room, and it did not do well. Like granted, Gardevoir did okay. Like obviously, a lot of players played it, but like we still haven't seen a top Ceruledge deck at all that in the tournament. Even when it was having all those players playing it, you would think one person would have won like very far with it. The difference with Gardevoir is it does have that track record. And honestly, European regionals are not the same as North American. I think we like Gardevoir better over here in the North American region versus in Europe. Europe is more diversified with what people play, in my opinion. And you can see that with some of the decks that actually did fairly well. But I think with that, because of that, Gardevoir, the highest placement was 10th, just because the diversity is much greater compared to Las Vegas or even just maybe some of the ICs, because more of like the NA or some of the other regions that tend to favor Gardevoir weren't there.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's one of those, like you said, it's more diverse meta in Europe. European players are more willing to take risks, but their risks are much more calculated. They're not trying to just play Blood Moon or Selena because they think it's fun. If they lock into an archetype, they think it can take advantage of the meta. And we see that it's more calculated over there than maybe over here, where over here it's, oh, this is a good deck, let me just do well with it. Over here, it's pretty much you can follow the ringleader and do well because they're telling you it's a good deck. Over there, it's, all right, I have to sit down and be playing the lab for a day or two to figure out if it is a good deck.
So with the diversity of decks in Europe, I think let's talk about some of the ones that kind of caught our eye that are different than what we're used to.
And
so
all these archetypes that we're about to talk about aren't brand new archetypes to the metagame. If you've been playing at tournaments online or even at regionals in the last month or two, these are archetypes that you've kind of seen kind of poke its head here and there. But this was a tournament where they were able to have someone do well enough to make into day 2. So we're by no means saying these are decks that no one has thought about. Honestly, all 3 of these archetypes we're about to talk about potentially have been seeing results, especially on the online meta. But now they were able to finally get their attention in the in-person regional format. So, Dean, what's the first deck that caught your eye that really sparked this conversation for today?
So, for me, the deck that really caught my eye was Slacking EX. Again, we've seen this before. It made day 2, but never really went far. This one got, what, 35th?
37th.
Like, it just missed top 32 by a slim margin. And honestly, it could have just bubbled out. I didn't really look at the records and all that. But the fact that this deck did so well at this tournament, I just had to be like, was this player just super comfortable? Did they just run hot? But yeah, like the Slaking EX, for those who don't know, it's a stage 2 EX Pokemon, 340 HP, so super bulky, with the Born to Slack ability. If your opponent has no Pokemon EX or V in play, it can't attack. So honestly, with how this format is, it's rare that you're going to run into a deck that is pure single prize. It has no rule box Pokemon.
And then if you do run into a single prize archetype, it runs one Team Rocket's Watchtower, which just turns off the ability of all normal types, yours and your opponent's. So it has a way out of that problem if it does run into an archetype or a board state where it really needs to attack, but its ability is going to prevent it. But also, the Team Rocket's Watchtower also does another piece to it, which is shuts down a whole bunch of Pokemon in format. It shuts down Blood Moon Ursaluna EX. It shuts down Pidgeot EX. It shuts down Fanrotom. So it really can be very helpful for you, not just for allowing your Slacking to attack, but also by just slowing your opponent down in the right turns.
Yeah, and even with the attack too, the Great Swing, you're doing 280 damage, which is a lot of damage. And it's also modified by playing the Dusknoir line as well. So you can get the one-shots that you need, especially on those stage or those Mega Pokemon, fairly easily. And depending on how you get your energy on there, you play Boomerang energy, so you can recycle your energy over and over again. You play Ignition energy, so it's easy, just single energy attachment to attack. Like on paper, this is actually a very strong deck, and I'm really glad that someone did really well with it, because I think people tend to forget about this card because it is kind of a little more difficult to set up. But having the Grand Tree to set up your Slacking really quickly, or your Pidgeot, or whatever you need. But yeah, I thought this was a very cool deck, and then I'm glad that I saw it in the top 64. I'm sure someone's going to take this and take it to the locals and hopefully do well with it.
Yeah, it's like we said, it's an archetype that's been around for a little bit and has been getting tweaked here and there. And again, it's one of those archetypes that's taking advantage of the meta. The meta right now is very much EX oriented. And as long as your opponent puts down a Pheasantipity, Slacking is live for the rest of the game. So it's one of those situations where definitely, if it was played in a different meta, it might be considered significantly worse. But because Pokemon loves to feed us EX decks, it's going to be fine.
Yeah, you're going to be able to attack every single game. So, Devin, what is a deck that caught your eye from this tournament?
To me, the deck that's kind of caught my eye is a deck I've been actually playing around in the background for a little bit. Is Mega Venusaur EX. I think Grass is becoming better, and now it's probably gotten a lot better because a Dark type deck just won the tournament again. Mm-hmm. So the Mega Venusaur EX is just your standard stage 2 Grass deck that runs Meganium, it runs Toescroll, it runs your Teal Mask Ogerpon. But this variant had a One of Woe Chin EX, which is very interesting because really it's the Covetous Ivy attack that is more than likely what you're going to be using, because 4 energy for 220 with no benefit. Very doable in this deck, but it doesn't really help you. But Covetous Ivy for 3 energy. This deck's 60 to 1 of your opponent's bench Pokemon for each prize card that they have taken. So end of the game, you can do up to 300. 300 snipe is amazing, and you don't even have to do 300 snipe. Like, you can just do it any point in the game and just take out a Pheasantipity at 4 prizes. You can take the stage 1 slowdown. Like, you can really just kind of slow your opponent down, all while kind of just manipulating the board state to your advantage, because you're putting the Toedscool in play, which means they can't really recycle cards from their discard pile to your hand. You're playing the EX, which protects the Pokemon with Grass Energy attached. It's a Grass attacker, so you get to hit all these Dark decks for weakness. So I think it did well. It had 1 placement in day 2, but I think here, looking forward, it's going to be better, because people are going to play more Charizard, which means there's more opportunity to hit it for weakness. So it's one of those. This could be a counter play to the meta because it hits some of the best decks for weakness.
Yeah, absolutely. I think right now we're reacting to Stuttgart with what happened, and obviously Charizard is doing well. Marnie's Grimmsnarl is still up there too. Sharpedo is now making an appearance. The grass archetype is just waiting for those decks to really feast on. Because right now, like, I'll be honest, I've been playing a couple games the last couple days on live, and I'm hitting nothing but fire types. So if I was playing Venusaur, I would be like very sad. But if you go into a tournament that's very dark focus, Venusaur is a very good choice because you're hitting for weakness. It doesn't take as many energy for you to get on board. And then if you have the Meganium, you're doubling anyway. So it gives you a lot easier of a time to set up your deck versus getting all that energy that you need to just hit hard.
Meganium, the energy doubling just busted. We've talked about that in other videos and other deck profiles. So it's one of those situations where even running into fire is not the worst thing in the world because Teal Mask Ogerpon can overcome that by the fact that fire decks typically need a lot of energy in the active spot, and Teal Mask Ogerpon loves seeing that. So you can definitely take advantage of that as well.
Absolutely. And then the last deck I want to talk about, this was a deck that just missed out on top 32 as well. And it's Cynthia's Garchomp. I know people are just waiting for it to really do well in the tournament. And so far, I think this is the highest place we've seen Garchomp at 34th.
Yeah, and it's one of those situations where it's very interesting because when I heard Cynthia's Garchomp doing well, my first assumption was it ran Force Vitality. That way you can just get your Roserades out of nowhere. But instead, it went back to the older kind of Toad Scroll route where it was controlling the discard pile for your opponent as you were just getting stronger. And then obviously the stadium of choice is Town Store, so you can get the power weight. So it's a deck that we all knew was getting better for Mega Evolution with Premium Power Pro, with Fighting Gong, and this just was a player that was able to hit the right matchups.
Yeah, I know at my league, we're waiting for Garchomp to get top 32 because it is such a powerful deck. It hits really, really hard, and it doesn't seem like it has a hard time getting set up. I'm kind of surprised it's taken this long for Garchomp to really make its own. I'm glad it did well in this tournament. It shows that it's still this is still a good deck. Seeing, yeah, like you said, the addition of Fighting Gong, of Premium Power Pro. I was glad to see that it just did well for once because normally we see him make day 2, but towards the bottom tables of day 2. This person was up in the top tables. I'm hoping for most of the day if he got 34th, you know.
No, that makes sense, and it's a deck I think it's getting close to its cap here at the top 32-ish neighborhood. I don't see it getting beyond that, but it definitely shows the fear that a lot of people had with Mega Evolution making this deck better. It definitely did get better. Now it just needs to run into probably a better set of metas because it doesn't hit anything in the weakness. Grass is better, so grass is hitting it into weakness. And it's just one of those situations where it's probably not in the best meta state to really make the most impactful waves at a turn.
Yeah, so we'll see how this deck does, see if this was just a player running hot or if someone will take this and really get another top placement with it. So, yeah, those were the decks that we saw that we were really surprised to see do well in day 2 or even just make day 2 in general. Again, I love seeing the European tournaments just because, as we mentioned, they're not afraid to take a risk. They're playing decks that really no one else will play. Like the first round 3, the first day on stream, it was Frostlass Monkey Dory versus Raging Bolt, but a weird Raging Bolt list. So it's like I love seeing the differences that the European players have versus what we are used to over here in North America. It just makes my rogue deck heart happy.
Yeah, and it's always, again, it's one of those situations where some of these archetypes have been established for a while, and they're just finally finding the right rhythm of the right day.
Yep. So that is Stuttgart. It happened. Congratulations to the Charizard player that won. I can't pronounce. I need to give him proper praise. Nikolai Storborg.
I would say you're better than me. I wasn't going to try to say the name. I'd rather not butcher someone's name. I'm that bad at it.
So I don't remember what the next tournament is off the top of my head.
For us or just in general?
In general.
In general would be this weekend with the Champions League in Aichi.
So, that would be cool.
So that using Japanese standard format. But the next regional for the TCPI region is not until 2026. It's not until the Toronto Regional on the 17th of January. So we have one more major tournament for the end of the calendar year, and then probably some city leagues here and there that kind of give us some data. But this was the last major event for TCPI for the rest of this calendar year. So basically, everyone's going on Christmas break, and then we'll be back in the third week of January.
Okay. So nice little break, us to get used to Phantasmal Flames. Honestly, brushing up on some of your mechanics, like this is the time to do it. Use your locals and trying to like get used to some of the things that we may take for granted. So with that, I think we can go. We're going to come back to something we used to do on this podcast, and we're going to talk about just some advice, some just ways to become a better trainer in light of a certain situation that happened a couple weeks ago at a tournament. We're not going to go in the details of it, but Dev and I were talking, and we figured it may be a good opportunity to talk about like how to shuffle your deck properly.
Yeah, so brief broad stroke of why we brought this up. There was a situation in the second day of the Latin American International Championships that a player was asked and kind of confronted about their deck shuffling preferences and their methodology. And if that was the contributing factor or not, we don't know. Pokemon has not made an official announcement over their decision, but there was a player removed from the tournament because of something that happened that may or may not be relevant to deck shuffling and deck etiquette. But with that being a thing, we wanted to really talk about that because if it was significant enough for Pokemon to remove a player from a tournament, it's significant enough for us to go back and look at what does it mean to randomize or shuffle your deck properly, and what is the etiquette in a match for both your deck and your opponent's deck.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important, especially if you're going to tournaments, especially on the etiquette part, because I remember going to a regional with some of my friends, and we're used to what how we shuffle. I mass shuffle personally, not because I don't like riffle shuffling. I physically can't riffle shuffle. If you see me, you will laugh at me. I am that bad at it. But some of my friends can do it very well. And one instance was we were playing, and he was telling me, he was like, yeah, my opponent got mad at me. I'm like, what did you do this time, man? He's like, yeah, riffle shuffle his deck. I'm like, oh. He's like, and it was like a very expensive deck because it was all like blinged out. And I'm like, did you ask permission?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I just went ahead and did it because that's what I'm used to. So it's stuff like that. That's why we wanted to bring it up, not to shame anyone, but like sometimes we just don't know, or we have our habits to where it comes second nature, especially if you play this game a lot. But you have to be aware of your surrounding, of the situation, of your opponent. And so we really just want to have this discussion. That way our listeners are more prepared when they go to the tournaments.
Yeah, and let's let's take a step back before we go into etiquette and all that kind of stuff, because we kind of use some terms already that maybe some players don't understand what they mean. So there are two major ways to shuffle a deck in the event of gameplay. And then there's a third way of shuffling a deck in between games or prior to games. So the two in-game ways to shuffle a deck that is most popular among players are what's called mass shuffling, or some people call it side shuffling, and then there's riffle shuffling, which is bending the cards and kind of doing what you see at the casino, right? The dealers at a casino, and you hear that click, 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 click. That's what we mean by riffle shuffle. And then mass shuffling is really when you grab the deck, put it on its side, and you're just shuffling it. Or maybe for those who used to watch Yu-Gi-Oh, you see the shuffling, and you see them just moving the cards and from the vertical to the horizontal status. That's more of a mass shuffle. So those are the two types of shuffling that are typically done during gameplay. Now, in between or prior or after a game, there is another type of shuffling called pile shuffling. And that is when you break your deck down, or when you're trying to shuffle your deck, you're putting the cards into piles. I think Pokemon actually defines pile shuffling as anywhere from 3 to 8 piles. If you try to do more than 8, a judge can stop you. If you do anything less than 3, they're just like, why? They just kind of question you. It's one of those like, why are you even bothering? Typically, players probably do. I've seen most players do 6 because it's a way to make sure you have your 60 cards. That way you can make sure you're keeping keeping your deck count proper. So you put them into the piles, and then you can shuffle the piles however you want, where you kind of just slowly start shuffling the deck more and more, and you kind of randomize kind of deal. So when we talk about those types of shuffles, keep in mind of those kind of general habits and those kind of ways of a deck being randomized. But before we really go into etiquette, again, we kind of define what it means of what are the actions of shuffling. Now, why do we shuffle a deck? So a shuffling of the deck is important because of the concept of randomization. And we can make it super complicated. We can make it complex, but really at the end of the day, anytime you enter the private knowledge area of the deck, once you exit that private area knowledge, you have to randomize the cards. And that means you have to shuffle the deck and be able to get that randomization. So there is a good probability that you're not going to be able to manipulate what's coming from the top of the deck, or you do not know what's coming from the deck because the randomization is preventing you from having guaranteed knowledge.
Mm-hmm. So a rule of thumb that I do when you shuffle, and no matter which way you do it, whether it be riffle or mash, as long as your top card changes multiple times, you're good. But at the same time, like, the rest of your deck should be changing order and all that, because that's what randomization is all about. Again, when we play the game, you thin out, you're trying to increase odds of getting certain cards. That's a whole different topic. We're just talking about once you leave the deck search stage, just getting your card, like shuffling, the act of physically shuffling your deck. That way, when you, whatever action you're doing, whether it's draw 7 or draw a card, you should not know what that top card is. It should be completely random, completely a surprise for you. And yeah, it's something that we have to get used to, especially in this game particularly. If you play other card games, we're known to go and shuffle our deck way more often compared to other games. Like, I'm starting to play Commander with my buddies. You're never touching your library or your deck. But Pokemon's unique where you go in your deck multiple times.
Yeah, the tutoring of, like, using Magic terms, right? The tutoring of your deck is something that is fairly standard in, like, standard. Smaller, obviously, Commander's 100 cards, so it's really, you don't typically tutor in Commander because it's really a singleton format. But in Standard, you probably tutor and search a little bit more. But Pokemon is notorious, and probably Yu-Gi-Oh to a much more greater extent, but Yu-Gi-Oh is much more specific search than just general knowledge search of Pokemon is, of going into your deck and getting something and then having to shuffle your deck and randomize it. So it isn't popular of a idea that you're going into your deck 3 to 4 times in your first turn. That's very, very common. And then the second turn, you're going back in 2 to 3 more times. And then the third turn, you're going back in 2 to 3 times. It isn't uncommon for us to search our deck up to 12 times before turn 4. And doing that many shuffles.
So we're shuffling our deck. Is there a certain way we're supposed to shuffle our deck, Devin? Like, can I look at the cards while I'm doing it? Is there an orientation I need to keep? Like, what do I need to really be considering when I'm doing my deck shuffle?
Yeah, so Pokemon doesn't actually have defined rules of how to shuffle your deck. Because really, it goes back to the spirit of the game of integrity. The randomization of your deck goes back to that main tenet of the game where Pokemon really wants the game to have a higher integrity value. So when you are shuffling your deck, there are really, in my opinion, 2 things you need to consider while shuffling your deck. 1, are you, like you said, moving the top and the middle and the bottom of the deck around to where you truthfully do not know what card is what? And then 2, while you're doing that, can you see the cards while you're doing that? And the reason why I say that part is important is because if you are looking at the bottom of your deck while you're shuffling, you know the bottom card of your deck. Even if there's 54 cards in the deck, you now have eliminated one option of that by knowing the bottom card. So your randomization isn't true anymore. So when you're shuffling either Mash or Riffle, you do not want to be able to see the bottom of your deck in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion, because then you have the integrity of the shuffle.
Yeah, like something that I do when I shuffle, I'll have the card my deck away from me, and I'm turning in the opposite direction just to make sure I'm not seeing that, because I don't want to be called out on stacking or knowing what's in my deck. So it's little things like that you can do to help prevent yourself and kind of keep yourself safe. That way you're not getting called out on either insufficient randomization or even just shuffling poorly.
And then keep in mind, every single time we're talking about a shuffle, we haven't even gotten to the post-shuffle pieces yet. But when you're doing that, you have to make sure that the deck is visible at all times.
Yes.
Very similar to when you're playing, your hand has to be visible at all times. You can't have your hand below the level of the table. Your deck cannot leave the level of the table. Your deck has to be seen and be able to be visible by your opponent at all times. So that way, they can assure the integrity of the shuffle. So, and that if they question you on it, you have to adjust. Like, if you're riffle shuffling and your opponent thinks you can see the bottom card of your deck, you either need to stop riffle shuffling because you're orientating the bottom of the card too far to where it can physically face you, or you need to change the way you shuffle because you're getting too close to a problem.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you just have to develop good habits, and I think starting at this point, and especially while we're in this lull period where we don't have any regionals right now, and you're just playing your local tournaments, take advantage of that and practice shuffling well. But with that, like, yes, there's the active part of shuffling, but there's also an etiquette portion of it as well, because once you shuffle your deck, you have to present your deck to your opponent and give them the option to either cut, shuffle, or they can tap, which what tapping means is they touch the top of your deck and say, yeah, you're good. I trust your deck. You're like, it's randomized enough for me. Otherwise, your opponent has the opportunity to make it more random in a way whether they're just cutting it in half or they're shuffling it themselves.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about what a cut is, what a tap is, what a shuffle is for that part of the randomization piece. So as you said, a tap is legitimately, the reason why it's called tapping is because it goes to the action of you just touch the top card of the deck and then you give it back to your opponent. You're effectively doing a 0-card cut. Now, you could cut the deck into proportions of any number between 0 and the entire deck -1. So if you want to cut the deck into half, you can just grab it in 2 different piles and put it together. If you want to grab the deck into 4 pieces and then just put it together in a different order and bring it back, you anything beyond 3, you're arguably shuffling the deck at that point, which brings a whole different orientation and steps, which we'll talk about in a minute. But you can break that deck into different piles and then orient to piles in a way to bring it back to your opponent, because then your opponent cannot control what you're doing, so it helps ensure the integrity of the shuffle even further.
And then obviously you also have the ability to shuffle yourself, so you can cut, tap, and then you can physically shuffle. And I think with that, there's another layer of etiquette there too, because again, you can either riffle shuffle it or you can mass shuffle it. But what I would recommend is that you ask your opponents, like, hey, can I shuffle your deck? Because some people may not want you doing that for multiple reasons. One, their deck could be very expensive. I'll call out one of my friends. He built a deck that's more expensive than my mortgage. And he brought that to a tournament. So some people bling out their deck that much and they're very careful with it, and they don't want you damaging their cards. So they may want you to cut it instead, which if that's their prerogative, out of respect, you should do that just because we all spend money in this hobby.
I would disagree. You have every right to shuffle your opponent's deck. Now, do you have the right to riffle shuffle your opponent's deck? Absolutely not. If your opponent wants to protect the integrity of their cards in terms of their physical cards, they can say, please do not riffle shuffle. They have every right to protect their physical property. But you cannot prevent your opponent from shuffling your deck at any point of the presentation of the cut. Now, if they go and riffle shuffle your deck after you explicitly told them, do not riffle shuffle my deck, absolutely call a judge on that. Because then they're just disrespecting, again, the etiquette. And they are potentially destroying your property, because that is a preference of your property. But you cannot prevent your opponent from shuffling at that stage, but you can ask them to just do a different type of shuffle.
I've seen it both ways. Normally people are pretty chill when it comes to shuffling, stuff like that, especially at the local level, which is what I'm more used to. I go to some regionals, but I go to like 1 or 2 a year. So normally people are very understanding, and they get the etiquette part of when you do a shuffle. But it's all about respecting each other. Like, we're there to have fun. If your opponent says one thing, as much as you can, please, you should respect their decision. It is their property. Don't be that person that was like, no, I need this because points are on the line. Like, yeah, we're all there to get CP and stuff like that, but is it really that important to you? That only you can answer that question. But yeah, there's a certain unwritten rule when we shuffle our opponent's decks.
Yeah, absolutely. Just be respectful. That's what integrity is all about. It's about mutual respect. And with that being said, how quickly you shuffle is just as important as how effectively you shuffle. So when you are shuffling, make sure it's quick. Make sure it's effective. Just, yes, in the beginning of the game, it's going to take you a little longer to shuffle a bigger deck than toward the end of the game when you have a 10-card deck. You don't need to be shuffling for 15, 20 seconds. Do a couple and then move on. And then in between games, if you're in a best-of-3 format, please be cognizant of the fact that you have 50 minutes to complete 3 games. And if you are going to shuffle, depending on what your method of in-between match shuffling is, make sure you have practiced it so it is done at a rate where you can get between end of game 1 and beginning game 2 in a fairly quick manner.
I will say I looked up the rules before we recorded just to see what they say about shuffling. And the one thing that they did mention was that whenever you shuffle, it has to be quick and it has to be thorough. That was the most important part when I looked up the rules. There wasn't anything in there about like orientation or anything, but they did make sure we knew, be quick. especially in a time format. Like, you only have so amount of time, and especially with all the deck searches and between games and all that, you're shuffling your deck a lot. Like, you can spend easily a fourth of your game shuffling your deck. Yep. Again, when you're at a tournament level, some people do shortcuts. So if you know you're going to go back in, there's an unwritten rule where we know, like, you don't have to shuffle your deck. But again, by the rules, every time we go in the deck, we're supposed to shuffle. So don't be mad if someone does do that as well, because I say that a lot. People are like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. I'm going back in." I'm like, no, you're fine. Like, you're supposed to shuffle. So knowing when to shuffle, how to shuffle, all that is important when it comes to playing in a tournament, because we are in a time space. There's not an unlimited time here. We have 50 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it may be, to play your game. So we need to make sure we do these mechanics right so we can play our game effectively and actually just finish the game as well.
Yep, absolutely. So we kind of, again, very broad stroke, kind of talked about the purpose and the need and the etiquette of deck shuffling. It's something that we take advantage of, or maybe we just don't think about it as players because it's such a fundamental piece of playing a trading card game. But if you don't do it right, you can get yourself in a lot of hot water. And it's a piece of reputation management that you don't want to have to do. It's better to manage a reputation that doesn't have to have any questions to it than to constantly having to defend yourself whenever you have a situation come arise. It's much better to be like, oh, he is known not to mess up. This is truthfully a mistake, versus he's already on his fourth warning. A judge is going to take that history into a play at a tournament. So it's one of those situations where you don't want to put yourself in hot water.
Exactly. And also with anything, when you play the game, if you feel like your opponent is not randomizing their deck properly, feel free to call a judge. It actually says in the rule book that if you don't think they're doing it right, call a judge, and a judge can intervene if needed. Because randomization and also just how to shuffle, it plays such an integral part of this game, because there's certain actions that can happen if the card isn't, if the deck isn't shuffled properly, and that you can either gain or lose advantages, stuff like that. So it's very, this is, even though we take advantage, or sorry, not take advantage, we're used to deck shuffling just because this is a trading card game, but it is a key mechanic to get down properly if we want to play in tournaments and get really more involved in this game.
Absolutely. And also, obviously, we play a lot on live, and everyone always wants to make fun of trading card game live and the randomization of the client. The client is probably the truest form of randomization you can get in practicing. But I think another thing that you need to practice is shuffling. Like, what I used to do when I was playing is I actually used to practice shuffling my decks. I used to shuffle my decks for 5 to 10 minutes a night, a couple of nights prior to the deck. That way I get a feel for my cards, I get the feel for the new sleeves, I kind of get a feel for everything. That way when the tournament game come, I wasn't fumbling around, and I kind of had the muscle memory already down.
So there you go, deck shuffling. We'll hope that this was very helpful for y'all. I will say I kind of miss doing these educational series, Devin. Like, it was nice to do the couple series that we did a few months ago. So I hope our listeners got a lot out of this. So with that, I think let's talk about a deck that players can build and get used to shuffling themselves. So you want to go into the rogue deck of the week?
Absolutely. It's in this week's deck, it's emphasizing one of the new EXs from the Phantasmal Flames format. And it is a very interesting timing of this because, obviously, of what is popular right now. And Dean, why don't you talk about this deck, because this is your little baby that you've been working on.
Yeah, so I actually got this idea with a couple of my locals. I went over during a cup. I got there late and I just helped with some deck checks and stuff. And I saw some players on the side, and one of the decks that they were playing was Empoleon EX. And I'm like, oh, I've kind of had my eye on this with Phantasmal Flames. And I'm like, hey, can I look through your deck? I want to see how you build it. And I'm like, I want to take inspiration from it. And they're like, yeah, go for it. Like, I even asked, like, can I use some of this in our videos? And he was like, yeah, go for it. So shout out to my local league. Again, they gave me a lot of inspiration. But yeah, so we're going to talk about Empoleon EX. It is a Stage 2 Metal type Pokemon, because Empoleon is a Steel type in the video game. It has an ability to where it prevents all effects of attacks from your opponent's active Pokemon. And then it has an attack for a Metal colorless for 210 damage, and then you take 60 damage less. And this card reminds me of Hisuian Goodra V-Star. I built that deck. I actually really loved playing that deck when it was around a few years ago. And I'm actually having a very fun time playing this list. Again, probably not the best timing in the world where Charizard is reigning supreme right now. But the way I'm playing and when I'm doing my practicing, I can get it going. It's an outcome of what the format is right now. But if you can avoid the pesky fire type Pokemon or the Zard archetype, this is actually a very fun list. We do play the Metang engine to power up your attackers in one turn. So it has a Metal Maker ability where you draw the top 4 cards, and any basic metal energy you find, you can attach to your Pokemon any way you like, and then you shuffle and put the rest of the cards on the bottom of your deck. It's a great way to go churn through your deck and thin out your energy. I do play 2 Genesect EX in here just to get the Metangs and the Empoleon EX out, because the pre-evolution, the Piplup and the Prinplups are water-type Pokemon. So we need to find a way to get our metal Pokemon out. And then one interesting Pokemon card I have in this list that I saw online, and it actually made a lot of sense to me, is I play one of the Wellspring Ogerpon EX. So it creates another typing in this list where I'm not just relying on a metal type attacker. I have a water type attacker as well. The Sob attack is very good. You can Sob block to really delay your opponent's setup. And then with the Torrential Pump attack, you can get rid of some of those low HP Pokemon and slow down your opponent that way as well. When it comes to the trainer cards, nothing new from Phantasmal Flames. I am playing full Metal Lab because with the attack from the Empoleon EX, you're being a little more tanky compared to what other archetypes are doing. So the full Metal Lab helps take 30 less, so you can effectively do 90 less damage. The ace spec of choice is Heroescape. Again, we're playing more into the tankiness of this archetype here. But yeah, everything else is fairly more like your standard trainer cards in here. I will say I do play 2 Crispin just because we are playing a split of metal and water energy. So it helps power up a Pokemon in one turn if you absolutely have to. During my setup, Crispin has come in clutch for me so I can attack. Because sometimes you whiff on the Metal Makers because we're only playing 9 basic metal energy. It's enough to where Metal Maker seems worth it, but at the same time, you can whiff a lot with it as well. But yeah, this is a very fun deck. If you're looking for something that's more on the tanky defensive side, this is a deck for you. I will say some inclusions that I would like to put in here, but I couldn't figure out room, was Jumbo Ice, where you can heal 80 damage. You can put in some other defensive tools in here as well. But yeah, it's just a fun archetype overall. Again, in this format, it's on the lower side of effectiveness, to be honest. but once you get this set up, it's actually really fun to play with.
Yeah, like the combination of Empoleon with the Wellspring Ogerpon, 210 isn't enough to knock out a lot of things, but it's enough to put the Wellspring Ogerpon into multi-prize turn territory, where
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to take KOs up front, but if they retreat and they put something on the bench that's not a Terra Pokemon, Wellspring Ogerpon can get you 4 prizes very easily.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's one of those situations where I think Wellspring Ogerpon runs multiple pieces. Where yes, you're right. You can knock out those low HP stage 1 and basic Pokemon so they don't get to those stage 2 EXs, or they just have damaged EXs on the bench. You're like, cool, snipe, let's go. So I think the inclusion of that Wellspring is actually very smart.
And it's also something you can power up in one turn. So it's something that you can hide from your opponent, bench it, use Metal Maker, power it up. We play Earthen Vessel in here to grab the water energy if we need to, and then yeah, like they won't know that that's coming because they're so focused on the Empoleon strategy. They're not thinking about the backup strategy that this deck can have.
Yep, absolutely.
So we'll have this in the show notes, and we'll also have the video coming out on Friday, the day after the release of this podcast. So be on the lookout for me playing this deck. Again, I've been having fun with it, even if Charizard is beating my butt with it. I'm really impressed with how I can get it set up. Again, 210 isn't strong, but you're negating 60 damage. So you're unless they're not paying attention, you're messing up how they're knocking you out too. And I've seen my opponents do that on me. Mm-hmm. So it's really fun. Another just fun deck if y'all are looking for something relatively cheap to build too, because these cards are not going to be expensive. I also will say I pulled a full art Empoleon, so I'm happy with that. So I had to build this deck and play this deck. So
yeah, absolutely.
So Dev, we talked about Stuttgart, we talked about deck shuffling, and we talked about road deck of the week. Do you have any final words for our listeners and our YouTube people today?
The one thing I would say coming from today's episode is this is an opportunity in a time of the year to where you can create and reinforce good habits or bad habits. And obviously you don't want to have the bad habits because it brings you in a situation you don't want to be a part of. And once you are a part of a story that is negative, it's going to take a lot of character rehabilitation to get you back to where you're going to be believable again. So create those good habits, create those good decisions, make those good decisions, and just focus on the meta instead of focusing on everything else. Because once you have the good habits in place, the rest will fall into place, and now you just have to worry about playing a game. And going forward into 2026, that's all we want to do is just play the game and have fun playing the game. So I think
exactly, yeah,
the deck shuffling is just one piece of those good habits, and we'll probably end up talking about some other things that are habits and character points that could put you into hot water. But again, going into 2026, we want just the phrase is good luck and have fun. That's all we want to do. So that's what we want to focus on.
Exactly. And if there's any other habits or mechanics you want us to explain further, let us know. Write them in the comments in the YouTube channel. We do see those. We do reply to those. And we're always looking for topics to talk about. So if you're looking for something to improve on, we're more than happy to help talk about that. That's something me and Devin loved talking about. We both are and were judges in the community for several years at this point. We both love playing this game, and it's a disservice if we're not helping you all. We should be supporting one another and developing good habits and good mechanics. So let us know what if there's anything else you want us to talk about. We'll definitely do that. But yeah, I agree with you. Let's develop those good habits now, especially during this off time in the season where you're just playing your cups, your challenges. You can experiment and really get good especially if you're planning to go on a regional, because regional there's a lot more at stake, and people will judges will be watching a lot more. So I'm glad that we talked about deck shuffling today. I'm glad we talked about the results and also gave you all another road deck to play with. So if you haven't at this point, please like and subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. We are a small channel. We're growing. I know we don't post a lot of videos, but whatever we do, we're very passionate. We love this game. We love this community. So please let us know how we can improve and all that. But with all that, I think we're good. Yeah, we'll see what other decks come out in the next couple of weeks during all this tinkering period. There's still going to be online tournaments. And then Devin said it, like we have Aichi the Aichi tournament next week, this upcoming week. So we'll see what Japan comes out, because Japan plays the game very differently than us. So with all that being said, thank you all for listening to this week's episode of the Road Deck Chronicles. And as always, have fun playing those sneaky decks.
Bye, guys.